Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Tuesday, the 4th of June. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barry. How's it going, Joshua?
Yeah, going well, Derek. We're obviously now 2 weeks into the summer break, 2 weeks without Rangers, but it feels as if the week's been, I don't know about you, but it's felt just as busy as the normal season. So loads to discuss, and looking forward to getting into it.
Yep, plenty of Rangers news, as Joshua says, to get stuck into. Before we do that, just a quick word for our podcast sponsors. That you do know by now, they've got a VIP Vegas-themed launch weekend coming up because they're opening up a brand new kitchen showroom in Dunfermline. So all you five bears out there, it runs from June the 14th to the 16th. 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's prizes on offer, free boiler services, 10% off services, and you can also be in with a chance of winning a 4-night stay at Trump Tower in Vegas with a helicopter tour as well. The all-important link is in the description below. Right, big news yesterday on the show. Breaking news was that Oscar Cortes has joined Jeffy as becoming Philip Clement's second signing of the summer. It is a season-long loan. Rangers with the obligation to buy. So pretty much like the Mohamed Diamande deal, folks. Rangers will pay loans. The fee agreed next summer. And he will be teaming up with the Rangers squad next season. Got to say, I'm pretty happy with this news, Joshua. I know we haven't seen much of him because he was injured at Rugby Park just shortly into his loan spell initially, but I've seen enough to get me excited about what's more he has to offer this Rangers team. You wrote a great piece on the website yesterday. You can read it in more detail by clicking the link in the description, folks. But what's your reaction to the Cortes news yesterday, Joshua?
Yeah, well, normally Rangers don't announce a signing at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, so slightly surprised at that announcement time. Obviously, Chris had the story last week about kind of where negotiations were up to. It's long been the desire of Rangers to keep Oscar Cortes at Ibrox and long been his intention to stay here as well. Speaking to people for this piece close to the deal, that was a key factor, and it can't be understated. I think sometimes when a player does want to stay, that makes it far easier for a club, obviously, if they want to keep him as well. You're right, he's been out injured, only played something like 7 games. He actually only played in the month of February because it was at the end of that month that he got that injury away at Kilmarnock. And I know there's been a lot of reservation about signing an injured player. I'm told he's recovered well and he's going to work with specialists over his holiday back home in Colombia as well. And he stayed an extra week at the Rangers training centre after he was obligated to, trying to get back in the best shape possible for pre-season effectively. So he suffered what was Clement called a freak muscle injury. And obviously we've seen since that plastic pitches have been banned. It's not as if he's been out for a year or a year and a half with a knee injury, Derek, that's going to take him 6 months necessarily to get back up to a level that Rangers would want him to be at for paying the type of money they eventually will pay for him. But I think it's the type of signing that Coppin has been brought in to try and make. We saw the impact that he made early on, and yes, he only played a handful of games, but I think everyone could see that he was a player who had a lot of quality. The plan obviously was to play him and Sima together. Both of those players can play on either side. Clement was never afforded that luxury. Cortes, if you look at his past, has played a lot of his football on the right-hand side in Colombia. The deal actually stretches back. Again, these are details that are revealed in the piece, but the deal stretches back well over 2 years. A lot was made publicly about a meeting that Rangers had with Cortes' representatives at a thing called Transfer Room, which is effectively, a lot of people will have heard of it now, effectively a transfer summit. Speed dating style is what it always gets referred to, where lots of clubs are there, lots of agents there, lots of representatives, and you have 15-minute slots where you then go and speak, catch up with contacts, speak to new contacts. And effectively, I think it's been running since 2016, 2017.
Like a football version of speed dating.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So there was a meeting before Christmas, I believe, at the Lisbon summit, but those relationships had been established before that. It wasn't as if this was the first time that Rangers or Coppin had come across Cortes and suddenly the player was pitched to them. By that point, Rangers had tracked him, I believe, for about 2 years, just before he had that performance at the Under-20 South American Championship, where he was one of the standouts, scored 3 goals. there's always going to be a going rate for a player who is one of the brightest young players in South America at that time. He's had that move to France, which didn't work out. I think it's Millonarios, as his club back in Colombia, is pronounced to have the same owner as Lon. So there was some, I guess, element of that lining up to get him into the European market. He's a player that people are excited about. Still a lot to prove, as we say there, because he has only played 7 games, and there's only so much you can tell about a player over that stretch. But he fits the model of what we've been told, and increasingly the noises you hear about the type of transfers that Rangers want to go and get. And obviously, I guess one of the benefits is he's already been in the building. He's already worked with Clermont for a number of months, and hopefully, all being well, he'll be ready to hit the ground running come the start of next season.
Yeah, a few comments coming in. Hugo Bear rightly says, in effect, we've given Cortes a 5-year contract. He will sign a 4-year deal in the summer of 2025. Stuart Mackay says, a good friend of mine is a Millonarios fan. They believe Cortes is his next big name, like James Rodriguez in Colombia. If he's anywhere good as him, then I think we have won a watch, although his career is... gone down the Swanee. I don't even know if he's still playing James Rodriguez, but I always remember that goal at the World Cup, and then he played for Real Madrid, didn't he? And it never really kicked on.
He did all right, I guess, comparatively for a footballer, didn't he? But I think that Cortes obviously is someone who he's already got a Colombia cap, and he's only 20 years old. It tells you he obviously is a player who's really highly rated. Back before he made that move to France and didn't really play for a number of months, he was touted as one of the Colombian football's most exciting young players. So Rangers will feel like they've got a player who, yes, the injury is frustrating, the fact that he wasn't able to contribute between the end of last season, because everyone could see when he came into the club, I even thinking back to the performance against Ayr United in the Scottish Cup, pretty inconsequential game. But I think you can tell sometimes with a player, if they, especially a winger, if they've got good decision making, if they've got the ability to go different ways, not a one-trick pony, just a clever football player. And I think you've seen that with Cortes early on. Obviously, he's only played 7 games, so it's still a little bit of an element of the unknown. But now he will be here, as the comment mentions, not only for that next season on loan, but Rangers have him tied down, and he'll be a player like Diamande that they'll hope can make an impact now, but also flip them a profit in the future. The question is, how do you balance out, as we're going to continue to discuss over the summer, Derek, and as we'll continue to discuss with the goalkeeping situation, as is on the website today, how do you balance out all these transfer decisions in one window when there is so much work to do because of the mismanagement of the squad that Rangers have had over the past couple of years? And that's the challenge that is going to be really difficult to solve, I think, between now and the transfer window closing in a couple of months.
Yep, Dave Fulton with the point says it'll be interesting to see how our South American contingent of Jeffrey, Cortes and Danilo play together. Yeah, and there could be more added to that. Of course, links with a number of South American players. Incidentally, they'll be speaking to a Uruguayan football expert, if you like, a little bit later on this evening. Very late because he lives over on the other side of the world, but we're going to get an insight into Damien Garcia, who's been linked to play for Peñarol in Uruguay, so that will be interesting. And Thomas Galdames is the other one that has been linked, the Chilean defender. One such player, as you touched on there, Joshua, who will be departing, I'd imagine, this summer, is Robbie McCrorie. We've got a story on the website, folks, this morning on the situation. He turned down a new contract on enhanced terms to commit his future to Rangers. A potential loan move to get him match minutes could have been on the cards as part of the deal as well. However, McCrorie has elected to look towards a new club and will be hoping to move on this summer. He has been linked with a move to Aberdeen already. I think he's good enough to be the number one at Aberdeen and pretty much every other club aside from Celtic in the Scottish Premiership. I think he's good enough to play for a host of clubs down south as well. Don't think he'll be short of offers, Joshua.
Yeah, it's been a long running saga, hasn't it? Because I think for the last 2 seasons you can trace it back even to when McCrorie came in during the COVID time, where Rangers beat Alishkert away from home, and then he's played in 2 Old Firm games, hasn't he? Because he played in that Old Firm win, the last one that Errol took charge of, although he took charge of that game remotely, didn't he? And then obviously played in the 3-0 game towards the end of that first season under Michael Beale. Played in all 5, I think, of the games, or maybe 6 games after the split and performed well. But when Jack Butland comes into the club, there is clearly only going to be one number one in that situation. McCrorie has played understudy for a long time. He's had promises, obviously, of game time that any goalkeeper trying to make the step up will have. You're not going to stick around for a number of years if that is not the case. And you can understand if now is the time where he wants to go and seek out regular football. That at 26, we have this ongoing joke that Robbie McCrorie is a young player. And in goalkeeping terms, I guess he's still relatively young, but over the course of football, he's not at all. So you can understand. And I know he's someone who you've thought for a while and said for a while, to throw it back to you, that he probably should have went and got game time earlier. But I guess, as is mentioned in the piece, that's something that perhaps was a desire in January. That wasn't the right time for Rangers, obviously, because of what they were trying to achieve in last season. The Liam Kelly deal comes into it as well. But I'll throw it back to you because I know you're someone who likes Robbie McCrorie and thinks he, as you say, could go and play a decent level, even if that is not going to be the Rangers number one.
Yep, I think it's cost him a place on the plane to Germany and as part of the Scotland squad. I think he's good enough. He's not any worse than Xander Clark, who played last night for Scotland. I think he should be looking to move on for the sake of his career. Of course, last summer, it's clear that he was probably given assurances from previous manager Michael Beale that he would get game time. Never quite materialised. He only got one competitive game, didn't he? The cup game away to Dumbarton at the turn of the year. So, he has to move on. It will be interesting to see where it goes. There's a comment coming in there saying that with Liam Kelly looking to be on his way, he could be ending up at Motherwell. There's an interesting comment as well. Jeeb gets in touch more, and Jeeb says, I'd try to use McCrorie in a deal to sign either Shankland or Miovski. Wouldn't be opposed to that. Miovski, I think, would be someone most supporters would be quite happy if they was to pitch up at Ibrox. Joshua, could you see McCrorie being used as a make-weight, perhaps, a player? Don't really see that much these days, a player swap deal.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if that happens. I mean, Miovski obviously is someone who everyone can see is a really good quality player, but he's going to cost you a lot of money. We know the difficulties Rangers are going to have this summer in terms of trying to balance everything. Depends on how many players they sell. Depends what happens with the likes of Jack Butland and other sellable assets. You know, Ridvan Yilmaz is someone who, especially after Jeff Day came into the club, a lot of people have started to speculate, does this mean that Ridvan is going to be on the move? But noises from his party suggest that is not the plan, at least this summer. Obviously, a lot can change over the course of the summer, and you don't know what the situation might be in August. And it's the same with this goalkeeping situation, Derek, because hypothetically, if a really big, it's not even that hypothetical, if a bid comes in for Jack Butland this summer, as it did at Christmas time, now we know Butland is happy at the club. He said as much when he spoke publicly about knocking back that offer to go back to the Premier League, even though it was 5 months before an opportunity to go to the European Championships, which I'm sure will have played into his decision as well. But Rangers are also they need to become a more effective player trading club. And when you've brought someone in like Butland, who has the English quota, who's obviously had experience of the English Premier League before, who is a highly rated goalkeeper, who now looks to be somewhat back to his best and has had that really good first season up at Rangers. And obviously you've not brought him in for nothing, because no free transfer is an actual free transfer. But you've not had to go and pay £6-7 million to bring him to the club in the first place. That all comes under consideration when you look at Jack Butland's future. The plan obviously was never to bring him up to Ibrox, or the presumption was not to bring him up to Ibrox and say he's going to be here for 6, 7, 8 years, as fantastic as that would be for Rangers supporters because of his age, because of he'd only be 38, 39 there. But as John Bennett has said publicly, and as Rangers so clearly need to fix, their player trading model needs to be consistent for that to be one of the, to use his terminology, pillars that hasn't been consistent enough for Rangers over a number of seasons. And so all these factors come into play as well. When does that happen? If Butland were to go, who is an able deputy to step up? Because Liam Kelly would be coming in not to be the Rangers number one, but to be a Rangers backup. But you know, what about the timing of it? What if it happens around the time of Champions League qualifiers? So this is all the difficulties. These are all the difficulties Rangers have to work out in rebuilding their squads effectively in one window, and it's going to have to be well managed to ensure that, I guess, the timing is suitable as well as the money coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of you saying I had to sugar my wire there. The mic was playing up again. Word is in with the boss man to get me a new mic, folks. So, yeah, I do apologise if you're having some sound quality issues. We need a new mic as part of the summer rebuild, please. And lots of, I mean, as I mentioned, lots of links. Liam Kelly, as I touched on there, Joshua, you'd imagine he'll be coming in as a number 2. He's, I'd imagine, content with that, giving up first team football to come returning to Rangers, of course, and John McLaughlin departing, one of the 5 out of contract players that left over the weekend. So, I mean, if you've got Liam Kelly there, Butland, as you just touched on, question marks over whether he will be part of the squad next season. Will you be looking to bring in another goalie, do you reckon?
I mean, if Butland were to go, you'd absolutely have to. And obviously, Rangers have quite a good tradition of signing good goalkeepers. I think it would be difficult to find one as good as Jack Butland. I'm not saying anything controversial by saying that, but clearly it's not going to be a situation where Rangers sell Butland and, you know, McCrorie goes out the door as well, and it's Kelly as number 1 with 2 goalkeepers coming in behind him. As you mentioned, John McLaughlin has left the club, and he was that kind of 3rd place, having been the 2nd place before. So it's an area where there could be no movement or there could be a lot of movement, and I think that extends to a lot of areas of the Rangers squad, because it depends on obviously what deals are going to happen. They need obviously a consistency in that area, because had they not had consistency in the goalkeeping position last season, their season would have been far worse, or ended sooner than it eventually did. Jack Butland, I know he made that mistake in the cup final, but Rangers wouldn't have, you know, arguably have even been there if not for his individual season over the course. So it remains to be seen exactly how much movement is going to be there, Derek. But if Butland were to go, if that offer were to come in, you know, it could be another season down the line again. To I think, and emphasise a point that he clearly speaks about himself. He's really happy at Rangers, and that factor comes into this decision as well. If he were to go out the door, Rangers would have to make a significant quality to that position to try and make sure that they weren't losing too much quality there. Because to go back to what Philippe Clement said a couple of weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago, when he was asked about the rebuild, he said some players you don't want to let go of, or you can't let go of. Jack Butland, that shows you how highly he rates him and his place in his Rangers squad going forward.
Yeah, Stephen with the point says if we qualify for the Champions League, Butland would stay. And Maka with the point as well says, morning guys, I'm concerned about the McCrorie contract offer. He's knocked it back, meaning he can run his contract down. We either sell him on the cheap or he runs his deal down. Bad news for PC. Yeah, I'd imagine he'll be moving on this summer, Maka. I would say that's certainly one I can see happening in the course of the next few weeks. There's an interesting point. Someone came in and said, John here with a point here, any news on a midfield? I think Rangers at this moment in time, Mohamed Diamandi, Nico Raskin started the last game at the Scottish Cup final, Joshua. When I was on the Q&A show yesterday, we discussed Todd Cantwell's future and whether he is likely to form part of the Rangers squad next season. But of the midfield, Ryan Jack and John Lundstrom have departed. Do Rangers need to bring in reinforcements, do you reckon, in that sort of number 6, number 8 position?
Yeah, again, I think over the course of the summer, it's probably important to remember that because Rangers are not starting from a position of strength, and they're not, you mentioned the out-of-contract players there, Derek, to have 5 out-of-contract players, not only this season, but last season, and you're not talking about players who have no value. You know, someone like Lundstrom has value. Kent and Morelos obviously have value, maybe not right towards the end of their Rangers career, but they certainly did at a point. To have that situation speaks of the fact that there's been so many changes in the leadership from a footballing point of view, to having a sporting director, to having no sporting director, to having managers with different levels of control, to now the football structure that Rangers do have in place, that obviously that this summer will show the benefits or the negatives of that. All that leads to situations like this where McCrorie is obviously a year away from being out of contract, but you've also had those 10 players out of contract who could have got you some fee. And Clement called it a crazy situation at one point, didn't he? So that tells you what he thinks of the situation. The point being, they have to rebuild quickly, and they have to rebuild basically to a list of priorities. So I'm sure there'll be areas of the squad that Clement wants to address that he'll think, do you know what, I can get by there for a while. I'm going to have to prioritise other areas of the squad first. Or that player, yes, maybe he's not my long-term solution in there, but I can address that in January, or I can address that next summer. So it's going to have to be a bit of I guess, solving a puzzle, to use an analogy that Clement has so far. Someone like Nico Raskin probably fits into that for me, Derek, because clearly there's some stylistic difference between him and Clement, how Clement wants to play and how Raskin plays. Again, that comes down to the fact that Rangers have changed their manager and changed their style so dramatically, which leads to someone like Raskin being the centre of midfield under Beale and then not really being in the picture for a while under Clement. But again, it's an area of prioritisation. Can you get a good season out of Raskin? I think you saw in the Old Firm game that he is suited to that level. I think he competed really well. There's maybe a question for me when he is playing in that number 6 position under Clement, who likes to play the ball directly, likes to get it forward quite quickly. Is he suited to that role? Maybe not. Do Rangers ideally need someone in that number 6 position who's just holds down that position and that is their role for a long time? Yes, they've not had that consistently since Stephen Davis. I think Diomande's probably better in that in-between role where he can drop, but he can go high as well. And to finish off, interested to see your thoughts on this, but Cantwell probably fits into that mould as well. The money that Rangers would get for him at the moment, does that reflect how good a player he can be? Probably not. Does Clement think of the quality of player that Cantwell can be? He can get more out of that over the course of next season. Again, work into that kind of priorities that we're discussing. I would presume so. So it's going to have to be a lot of chopping and changing. The midfield is probably one of the areas to throw it back to you where you do have, you need depth, you need a little bit more. You do have quality there at the moment, at least.
Yeah, I wanted to raise this point from Steve-O before I give my view on it. He says, Derek missed the Q&A, but on Cantwell, he's absolutely an asset. We should be moving on. His own worst enemy and frighteningly inconsistent. We could do much better. I think we've already seen his best.
Good to see Steve-O agrees with the point I've
just...
No, I think that I can understand that point of view, because you look at these big games and Rangers have lacked... the games obviously against Celtic, Rangers have lacked the difference makers. I go back to someone like, look at Malik Tillman, right, who's now absolutely thrived at PSV at a much higher level. Even someone like Amad Diallo, these players who maybe were individuals to a degree, couldn't quite do it at Rangers, or I think Tillman did, but maybe in Old Firm games he wasn't able to really push Rangers over the margins, even though he was a really young player. I'm not saying Cantwell necessarily fits into that same bracket, but when you are playing in a team that probably isn't functioning that well, I think Cantwell is a player who would feel the effects of that more, because he's not a winger who's an individualist. He is someone who relies on the connection he has with teammates. The style's changed a lot. He's had those 2 injuries. At times, does he let himself down, or does he make himself too much the centre of attention on the pitch? Yes, I think so. What I would say on that is also a strength to try things, to take risks. And so then the downside of that is probably that when that doesn't work, or when you're not playing well, that looks a bit foolish. I totally understand the sentiment, though, that he's not done enough. And if you are going to be someone who carries yourself like that, then you've got to win the big games. You've got to turn games for Rangers. I thought he played decent enough in the Scottish Cup final and certainly grew into the game a bit. Again, though, the question is, for the money that you would get now, are you going to get a player of his quality if you have a season where he is injury-free, where he can work with Clement? And Clement, I think, is a manager who will demand the best out of him, and you can see that with his public comments of him after the St Mirren game, where he effectively said, look, Cantwell he makes a difference when he's focused, when he's on and off the ball, that's when he can make the difference. So again, the decision Clement will have to make is that a risk worth taking? Is he going to be my out-and-out number 10 in there? And if that is the case, then can he be relied upon across the course of a season to get Rangers over the line?
How much do you think he's worth, Joshua? Because I was on with Stevie last week. He said, I think 1.5 to 2 million he'd be happy selling him for. I'd be looking for upwards of 3+, I've got to say. I think he's still a top player. I don't think Rangers should be looking to sell on the cheap.
No, I agree. 1.5 is quite is lower than I thought Stevie would maybe suggest. I guess the question back to you, Derek, and from my point of view, would be how much could he be worth if he has a really good season? I know he's now 26, so he's not young, but he's got that English quota.
He was touted before he joined Rangers. Remember, before he sort of lost his way a little bit, he was touted for big money moves when he was breaking through at Norwich, like proper eye-watering sums of cash.
And everyone can see what a good player is. I still think technically, if you look at all the players in the Rangers squad, he's probably the best. Now that there's a different question about how you apply that, and and how that actually looks in a match day. And he's not had enough, big moments in an Old Firm game. He's not really he's not someone who's going to score a goal from distance that much, or again go past 5 players and score. He is more of a creator, isn't he? He would, I'm sure, from his point of view, argue that, look, he started really well under Beale, especially the end of that last season when he was playing in that number 10 position. He was moved around a lot at the start of last season, and then he suffered an injury. He came into play under Clement, and the style of football is really different. And I don't think it's as suited to Cantwell because it's more direct. It's more about playing close to the striker. What I would say is at points, Cantwell's helped Rangers to be less direct, and it's going to be interesting to see over the summer, especially the profile of centre-back that Clement gets into the club, how that can change, because there was away games last season where I think Rangers were just like the Dundee game, where they were just too reliant on trying to turn the defence to create chances, and that eventually caught up with them. But yeah, the question for me would be, how much can Cantwell be worth? Maybe similar to someone like a Ridvan as well. If he'd sold him last January compared to now or next summer, he's going to be worth a lot more money for the quality that is in there, and that is going to be Clement's challenge. Cantwell does stay. Can he get consistently good performances out of him? Like we saw in patches, like we saw probably before he had that injury away at St Johnstone, and that was an unfortunate timing because he'd obviously scored the match winner against Aberdeen, scored a few more goals, but then had that disruption as well, came back, was kind of in and out of the team. It's a big decision for Clement to make this summer, but my feeling would be he will be a lot more than the fee you put to be if you can get a good season out of him, and maybe that's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, I like him. I've got to admit, I would like to still see more from him. Derek Gray with an interesting point. This was a point someone made a couple of shows ago, I'm sure. Says, I think Todd will show better with more quality to link up with. That's a fair point, I think, from Derek there. Interestingly, good friend of the show, Stephen Pudding, gets in touch. He says team needs to have a solid spine. Butland, 2 new centre backs, centre mid, and a prolific number 9. I fear Butland might end up leaving though. Plus, if an offer of 10 million plus comes in, we can't refuse that. I would be wanting a wee bit more for Jack Butland, I've got to admit, especially when you see goalkeepers going for the sort of fees down south. But listen, if he stays at Rangers, I think everyone would be quite happy with that. Just on the midfield situation, Stephen with the point, Bailey Rice stepping up to the 6. Get a feeling Clement will want to use our academy players. Everyone to a man that's been used has showed real promise. He's someone we haven't really seen anything of him. I know he had a sort of niggling injury, Bailey Rice, and the manager was quizzed on him. I'm not too sure if it was Johnny or someone else that asked him in a press conference a few months ago about Bailey Rice, and he was talking about bridging that gap between the B team and the first team, and how it's a huge difference in terms of getting ready to play and consistently for the first team. Joshua, is he someone... I think when we spoke about him last summer, we were all looking forward to seeing more of Bailey Rice after making his debut. I think it was at the tail end of the season before last, but we never really seen anything of him.
He's obviously, he's still 17, so he is actually, we have a habit of saying someone's a young player and they're 22, but he is actually a young player. Obviously had the quality at Beale. He's a player that Beale really liked, and he came on at the home game against Real Betis, if memory serves me correctly. Has had those niggling injury issues. You've seen with Clement that he is someone who not only wants to feed academy players into the first team, but clearly he feels to solve Rangers squad building issue, they need to do that. With someone like Ross McCausland being the best example. Clement obviously used towards the end of last season the example that McCausland had only trained, I think, 5 times with the first team the season prior, compared to obviously his season this season where he'd be coming out and out first team player. So Rice is someone that, as you say, had those niggling injury issues. Everyone knows his quality. Again, a different style of football now under Clement, but he's someone who I think his passing ability is probably one of his biggest strengths. And it'll be interesting to see over pre-season what happens there, because you're right, this time last year, he was really highly touted. Again, probably a lot of change in the building doesn't help that pathway, doesn't help the what is not an easy jump to become a first-team player consistently. But he is someone that we know has a lot of quality, and Beale was really excited about for a reason. So one to probably keep an eye on in particular over pre-season, I'd say.
Yeah, and Rangers look to be acquiring another young hot prospect from Hearts. You'd have seen the news yesterday, Alfie Hutchison, 15-year-old forward. He was attracting attention from a host of clubs in the English Premier League. Recently played for Scotland under 16, scored against both Italy and Portugal, and Rangers look to have won the race for his signature. Hearts will be due a compensation fee due to his age, but he is another one to keep an eye on, I guess, as he progresses through the academy. Right, that'll do us there. Big thanks to Joshua as ever. As I touched on earlier on, go and read his great piece on Oscar Cortes inside the transfer deal after his move was announced yesterday. Chris's piece on the goalkeeping situation is on the website as well. Over on YouTube, a heads up, I will be speaking to someone a little bit later on this evening on Damien Garcia. I'm also speaking to someone who has watched Rilla Bohill Mofokeng in detail, so we'll get a bit of insight into the highly rated South African player as well, who has been linked with a move to Rangers. So that is something to keep your eyes peeled for. It will be released on the extra channel a little bit later on. So no live signings being announced while we're on air, which is disappointing, but I'm sure there'll be plenty more throughout the course of the next weeks ahead. So there you go. Right, folks, thank you for tuning in, and we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye.